It was 6:30 p.m. on Monday, November 17th of 1958, and the Carl D. Bradley had just left Buffington Harbor, Indiana, after discharging its cargo of limestone. The weather wasn't pleasant, which was common for the month of November, but there was no reason for concern, as the ship had been certified seaworthy after 2 inspections in January and April by the Coast Guard and the Lloyd's Registration Shipping Inspection Service. The ship was also filled with a responsible and dedicated crew of 35 men. The ship sailed smoothly through the rest of the Monday night without any notable events occurring. On the following day of November 18th, gale warnings were posted on Lake Michigan, and many smaller freighters had anchored in the nearest bay or were tied up in port. But the Bradley would try and ride out the storm, as most bigger freighters do. Not much was done on the Carl D. Bradley to compensate for the storm, other than adding 9,000 tons of water ballast to make up for traveling without cargo. Of course, this is because a vessel riding high without cargo gets hit harder by the sea than a vessel loaded with cargo. By the late afternoon of November 18th, the wind was plowing at 65 miles an hour, propelling the waves to heights of 20 feet, with the occasional one reaching 30 feet. The Bradley was near the Beaver Island archipelago and was moving without trouble. And there was not much reason for concern, as the ship was not under much stress. But as always, the calm comes before the storm. But before I get into the rest of the story, let's rewind back to 1927. The Carl D. Bradley was built at Lorain, Ohio, from riveted steel plates stitched together to form the hull. Upon its launch in 1927, the vessel was the largest on the Great Lakes, being 640 feet long, 65 feet wide, and 33 feet in depth. Fast forwarding back to 1958, the Carl D. Bradley was just off Beavers and Boulder Reef. It was 5:15 p.m., and Captain Roland Bryan had just radioed the Bradley transportation line at Rogers City, telling them that he expected to bring his ship to port at 2 a.m. The ship continued smoothly through the storm until 5:31 p.m. First Mate Elmer Fleming and Captain Bryan were on watch in the pilot house when they heard the sounds of a thud. Both hurled around at the sound and realized that the stern section of the vessel was sagging. Captain Roland Bryan stopped the engine and rang the general alarm bell, and seconds after, there was another loud thud, and the ship moved upward as the stern continued to sag. Then the mayday call was sent out. "Mayday, mayday, mayday, this is the Carl D. Bradley. Our position is approximately 12 miles southwest of Gull Island. We are in serious trouble. Run, grab life jackets, get your life jackets. Mayday, this is the Carl D. Bradley. About 12 miles southwest of Gull Island. The ship is breaking up in heavy seas. We're breaking up. We're going to sink. We're going down." Another thud was heard, and the aft section sank further. Captain Bryan then sounded the ship's whistle. 7 short blasts, followed by 1 long one. The signal for abandon ship. Right after that, another loud thud was heard. The stern sagged further, and then the ship split apart, and the gap between the fore and aft sections began to widen. Radio contact was lost with the Bradley at 5:45 p.m., as the splitting of the vessel had caused the power cables to sever. The 2 sections were taking water fast, and all of a sudden, the fore section rolled over to one side, sending crew members into the cold November water of Lake Michigan. Then the stern went down shortly after, exploding as the ship's boilers came in contact with the frigid waters. Many of the crew members were left floating on the surface, as most had managed to grab life jackets, but the towering waves would lay victim on many. 2 of the crew members, Elmer Fleming of 42 and Frank Mays of 26, had been lucky enough to land near a life raft after they had been thrown off the front end. Both climbed on and watched in horror and awe as the stern section rose up and plunged into the water, exploding as it went down. In the early hours of the night, 2 crew members, Gary Strzelecki, a 21-year-old deck watchman, and Dennis Meredith, a 25-year-old deckhand, had joined the raft as they had been pulled on by Fleming and Mays. Fleming had fired almost all of the raft's flares, saving the last one for the chance of a ship passing near them. There would be a boat that would pass near them, though, that being the Christian Satori, a 250-foot German vessel. The ship was only 4 miles from the Bradley as it headed for the spot of its sinking. On a good day, it would take 15 minutes to arrive at the scene, but it took the vessel a good 2 hours to arrive on the scene of the sinking. The Satori had seen the flares go off and upon reaching the scene had not found any crew members in the frigid waters. Captain Muller would keep his ship in the general vicinity, continuing to search for hours with the help of a Coast Guard amphibian plane, but would find nothing but a raincoat and a tank from the vessel. Muller would radio a chilling statement, saying, "I believe all hands are lost. No lifeboats are visible." This was far from the truth, though, as 4 of the crew members were still clinging to the raft. The sea was not kind to the crew members, though, as they had been hurled off over and over by the storm as the raft would flip upside down. On one of those occasions, deckhand Dennis Meredith would be lost to the sea, as he never returned to the raft. In the early hours before dawn, Gary Strzelecki would lose his will to live and would fall from the raft even after the efforts of Fleming and Mays. Now they were the only 2 left alive. The Coast Guard had been on the scene with 2 of its vessels, the Hollyhock and Sundew. However, they did not find any survivors. Into the daylight hours, the 2 crew members left alive were clinging onto the raft and clinging onto life. But there was no doubt in their mind about being rescued. About 20 miles from the wreckage site, they saw High Island and knew that their rescuers would arrive soon. Around dawn on November 19th, a Coast Guard helicopter spotted a life raft with 2 men aboard. The Sundew then headed for the spot and at 9:07 a.m. sent a message stating that they had found 2 survivors 5.25 miles from Gull Island. Mays and Fleming chose to stay on board the Sundew instead of being sent to the hospital, as they wanted to be out there with their fallen crewmates as long as possible. Of the 35 crew members, 33 died, many of which were married men with children. One of them was scheduled to be married to his sweetheart in Shipwrecks only days after the last trip. All but 2 would return, leaving the rest with mourning wives and children. Although the Carl D. Bradley had passed the inspection twice in that year, Captain Roland Bryan still had concerns over the vessel, as the ship had struck ground at Cedarville, Michigan, rupturing one of its plates, and although it was fixed, the captain would still state his concerns in several letters. Before November 18, 1958, the Bradley Transportation Line had been given the name of safest in the world by the National Safety Council and had never lost a ship. It seems many freighters of the lakes meet their doom on the last trip of the season. Many are eager to get home to their wife and kids and put much faith in their ship. But the power of the sea should always be respected. The tragedy of the Carl D. Bradley remains one of the biggest in Great Lakes maritime history, and the Bradley is one of the largest vessels to ever sink on the Great Lakes. All that aside, thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to my channel and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.